Welcome everyone. I call this May 18th, 2022 meeting of the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority to order. All members are present this evening via video conference, and I'd like to welcome Lawrence Royale, who is representing Mayor Keller, and Commissioner Piscotti is excused this evening. So welcome, Member Royale. Are you there? Well, with that, we will go on to the moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Quesada.
Okay, repeat after me or follow me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I hope everybody, I apologize for not saying it earlier, just everybody during the moment of silence, just to keep all our New Mexicans in your thoughts and prayers that are, with these terrible fires that we're having, and then obviously for the people of Buffalo and the people that lost their lives so tragically. So thank you all. As posted on our website and noted on our published Water Authority agenda, this meeting is being held via video conference. The Water Authority accepted general public comment and comment on the meeting's specific agenda items in written form through 4 p.m. today, and these comments were distributed to all the board members, so I'm sure you've had an opportunity to review them, so thank you. Next, we have approval of minutes. I make a motion to approve the April 2022 minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Feeblecorn and Ms. Carrion, can you call the roll?
Counselor Feeblecorn?
Yes.
Counselor Jones?
Yes. Here.
Vice Chair O'Malley?
Yes.
Chair Pena?
Yes.
Commissioner Quesada?
Aye.
That passes unanimously.
Thank you, and I apologize, Commissioner O'Malley. I was going to call you Commissioner Debbie. So anyway, so with that, we will move on to awards and proclamations and awards. There are none this evening. Next, we have public comment, and as I stated previously, public comment was accepted prior to the meeting and distributed to all the members. Item 6, announcements, communication. Our next scheduled meeting. Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Feeblecorn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To raise the issue of accepting public comment again. As a governing body, I feel like we should be accepting a live public comment. I'm wondering if there's any chance that we could do that in the future.
Oh, absolutely. I think we're just transferring into that. I apologize. I think Commissioner had mentioned that as well. So yeah, probably by the next meeting, which would be, what is it? 29th. Thank you, Ms. Carrion. So next we have our next scheduled meeting will be, I was actually going to say that, June 29th at 5 p.m. via video conference. Introduction and first reading legislation, there's none. So now we're on to the consent agenda, and I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
There's a motion and second by Commissioner O'Malley and I think Feeblecorn.
No, Madam Chair,
roll call.
Was to pull from the consent.
Oh, I'm
move to 2217 approvals.
Approvals. I don't think we need a vote on removing something from the consent agenda, so we will remove that per your request. So with that, with the rest of the items on the consent agenda, I would move approval. Was there a second? Okay, second by Commissioner O'Malley and Councilor Feeblecorn. Ms. Carrion, will you please call the roll?
Yes, and just to clarify, that was R 2217 or C 2217?
R 2217.
Alrighty. So Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Jones? Or Counselor Jones?
Yes.
Vice Chair O'Malley?
Yes.
Chair Peña?
Yes.
Commissioner Quesada?
Aye.
Member Rael?
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Thank you. With that, we will go on to R 2217, declaring that certain Albuquerque, well, you know what, I'll just send it over to Councilor Feeblecorn.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question on R 2217, just declaring that certain Albuquerque County Water Utility Authority property located at the southwest corner of Second Street and Rio Bravo Boulevard is surplus and should be sold at fair market value. So I'll move the consideration of the bill, but I do have some questions.
Sorry about that. So I would move it to pass on R 2217. Is there a second?
Second.
So there's a second. Now, discussion, Councilor Feeblecorn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just curious. The description for this, I understand that land is not needed by the utility authority, and that it's going to be sold for fair market value. But I wondered about the requirement, if we couldn't add a requirement that when it is sold, it does contain some affordable housing units. I know that Director Sanchez has indicated that he was hoping that he'd be able to work with a purchaser for making sure that there's some affordable housing, but it's my understanding that we can't actually put that as a condition of sale. And so I just wanted to hear if that was a possibility.
Madam Chair and Councilor Feeblecorn, yes, it is. However, I would caution the board not to specify how much affordable housing because that could change the valuation of the property, but perhaps simply indicate that there must be some component of affordable housing. I think that'd be acceptable.
I would love to see that in the requirement for the sale. I understand your point about not changing the value of the property, but leaving that up to the discretion of the director to negotiate, but just having some security that we know that this land, which is in a really prime part of town, and we all know we're in an affordable housing crisis, just to make sure that that's a condition of sale, that there will be some consideration for affordable housing.
We will certainly do that.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Quesada.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. But I could probably say with some certainty that because of the area, it probably will be affordable housing. It's not the best area, but it's an up and coming part of area, and I agree with you. It's definitely the future of Bernalillo County, and the city of Albuquerque is my district, and definitely I will stand next to you and definitely try to hopefully talk with whoever decides to purchase this land to make sure that definitely that there's got to be a section of affordable housing. My dream, and I don't know if it will happen, but it's also mixed use sort of kind of development, right? So there's more. So we're looking at housing and jobs, and we're looking at all of it. I think in one kind of big fell swoop. I've been traveling all over the country. That's the new kind of development that's going in many of the larger cities. It's the mixed use, so it gives opportunity for small businesses and combined with affordable housing and those sorts of things. So I'm hoping that that's also something that that whoever decides to develop on this land does that also. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Feeblecorn, did you want to make an amendment to R 2217 saying that it should have a component of affordable housing, or did you want to leave it as is?
I'll ask Director Sanchez. I would like to see it in there. I'd like to hear what he thinks.
Madam Chair,
Director.
Councillor Feeblecorn, I think if you wanted to amend the resolution to include that, that's fine. Again, I would not specify how much, but simply that it have a component of affordable housing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I will an amendment states that the sale of this property will include a requirement for the allowance of some affordable housing.
Would you consider an amendment to say just a component of?
Yes, Madam Chair, that's better than my words. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will, is there a second to that?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Ms. Carrion, will you call the roll on the amendment to R 2217?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Raya.
If I might just ask Sanchez a question. Mark, with this amendment, we're making the assumption that whoever buys it is going to turn this property into housing. What if it's not housing? What if it's someone wanting to buy it for a manufacturing program or something else? I just want to make sure that if we're trying to get the highest and best value that we possibly can, we're sort of making an assumption that housing is the only thing that's going there, or is that a decision we've made already?
Madam Chair, Mr. Rael, I think the amendment would allow some discretion in that it would only provide for a component of affordable housing in the entire parcel. It doesn't specify how much of the land. So I think generally it should not affect the valuation based on that.
Thank you, Director Sanchez and Mr. Rael. Does that answer your question?
I'm
I know you were kind of coming in and out. And this was just actually posed by Councillor Feeblecorn during this meeting, so this was not planned prior.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. The conversations, so apologize. I'm getting a really bad feedback from the conversations. I don't know if that's true for all of you, but I'm getting every other word, but I'm good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner O'Malley.
thank you. I think just to sort of follow up where Lawrence Royale, and I've obviously, and it's been very clear that I'm a very strong proponent of affordable housing, and of course it's a huge need. It's really kind of weird. We would basically lose site control if we sold it. And once you lose site control of a piece of property, it's kind of like, then it becomes the property owner's essentially right to develop it, of course, within the confines of zoning, etc. But I think that's a good question. What if it was totally, if somebody purchased it for manufacturing or something else for business and had no intention of putting affordable housing in, I could see why that could be a concern. If there is going to be a multifamily housing project there, then I could see how we would say, yeah, it should have a component of affordability. But if we really want to cite or make sure that that's affordable in some way, shouldn't the city acquire a portion of it so that they have site control? Why is this going out to the, I'm just asking these questions. Why is it going out, for whoever? Because you've got a government agency that owns it now. And so you have some control over it. Why is the city, would the city be interested in acquiring it or somehow making some kind of an exchange, government to government, to get site control over that piece of property? Those are just questions I have.
Madam Chair, Commissioner O'Malley, I think in the end, whoever purchases this property will be coming to the city or the county or both to assist with the affordability component in the development. And we could certainly put some covenants on the property as it is sold and developed to ensure affordability. I just think we should be cautious about putting too many requirements on this before we go to the market.
Okay, and I think that Commissioner Casada brought up a good point too. We really do want to see more mixed income housing and this sort of mixed use housing with other components in it. That's a healthy mix. It's important. Good example is Sawmill. While there is some, most of the housing is affordable there. It's affordable to different, income levels, and also there's market housing involved as well. To kind of like, so you don't have nothing but affordable housing in one group, for example, but you have a mix, which is reflective really of communities and neighborhoods. So just want to make that statement. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, if there's no additional discussion, I just want to say how much I appreciate Councilor Feeblecorn's amendment. Just for the reasons stated, I don't feel like I can support it. I think that, our job here is to make sure that we get the best and highest price for the property if it's the intention to sell it. And I think that obviously it's such a large parcel that it would make sense to whoever purchased it to make sure to include some component of whether it be affordable housing or mixed use housing or some type of use. So thank you, Counselor. But with that, we will, I'll close the floor. Ms. Carrion, will you call the roll?
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
No.
Chair O'Malley,
Yes.
Chair Pena,
No.
Commissioner Casada,
Aye.
Member Rael. One, two.
Get that?
Passes on a 4-2 vote.
Madam Chair, if I might.
With that,
If I might just.
Mr.
One
Rael.
point I would make to Commissioner O'Malley's point. Now that we put it up as surplus, we certainly as a city or anyone can intervene and purchase the property. So I think for me, voting yes was mostly to get to the point of having the conversation as if the city is interested, and I know that we are, having it now declared surplus, we can obviously make an offer if we want to do some affordable housing on that property. So I don't think it closes the door to that conversation. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Member Rael. So I think that amendment passed, correct? Luz, I'm hearing every other word as well.
Ma'am, that passed on a 4-2 vote.
Okay, so with that amendment, I would make a motion for approval of R 2217 as amended.
Second.
Is there a second? I think that's Commissioner Quesada. Luz, can you call the roll?
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Vice Chair O'Malley,
Yes.
Chair Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Quesada,
Aye.
Member Rael.
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Thank you. So before we move on to approvals, I just want to say, is everyone getting the feedback that I'm getting, or is it just my computer?
Madam Chair, I'm getting really, really bad feedback and echo and missing every other word.
Right now. Oh.
I can't hear much of anything, Madam Chair. It's just a word here, a word there, and what is an echo.
Thank you all. So I think maybe before the next meeting, Luz, because I know I'm on the other platform and I haven't really had this problem. So I don't know if it's, I don't know what the issue is. I keep looking at my internet and it seems to be connected. So just want to make sure, because I think we keep experiencing this. And I heard Commissioner O'Malley a second ago saying, I don't like this. So, so anyway, with that, we'll move on to approvals. A presentation for items O221, B, R13, R2213, and C, R2214. Mr. Stan Alred, they all relate to each other, so we'll hear them all together. So thank you. Stan.
Madam Chairman, members of the board. I'm creating an echo now too, so hopefully it'll stop. This next slide, please, Luz. Just assumptions we made in the budget. This is just kind of a follow-up from the introduction from the last board meeting. We're proposing a 5% rate revenue adjustment. We have not had a rate increase for over the last 4 years. We have created many efficiencies and done things to alleviate needs for the rate increase. However, we've come to a point where one is needed. This also includes a 5% increase to the UECs and the water resources charge. We normally increase that charge by the ENR index as per the rate ordinance. We deferred that last year completely, and this year we decided to go with 5% along with the rate revenue adjustment. If we had went with the ENR index, it would have been upwards to almost 15%. So we just capped it at 5. We budgeted with nominal growth in our service area. We based the consumption levels on 120 gallons per capita. We added 6 FTEs to this year's budget. We budgeted a 7.9% increase in health insurance premiums, 5% increase in para-pension contributions, and 5% increase in wages. The 7.9%, we pick up a very large portion of any increase for health premiums for our employees. Therefore, we budgeted that. That does not get passed on to the employees. We, as the employer, pick up a large share of that increase. We also been having substantial increases in our operating costs, specifically with fuel costs, our chemical costs, and a lot of this is due to supply chain issues and inflation. And we make sure we maintain a 1/12 fund balance as mandated by the rate ordinance and by this board. Just a quick picture of the revenues. 135 million will be from water. Wastewater will be $98 million. Revenue from miscellaneous things is 10.6 million. And we're going to use $1 million from our working capital balance, which currently resides at about $35 million. We're going to use $1 million of that to help fund the operating budget. Next slide. Our budget, just a quick snapshot of our expenses that we budgeted. Our debt service payments is $78 million. Wages and benefits is $68.1 million. Our operating expenses to operate, our operating groups, $59.4 million. We transferred to CIP to pay for CIP projects, $36.6 million. Our risk for self-funding is 2.8 million. I'm sorry, and workers' comp is $700,000. Next slide. Proposed budget. So a breakdown of where all that different buckets go. Administration is 10.1 million. Financial services is 24.6 million. As I said last time, it sounds like a large number, but it also consists of customer services, our banking fees, those type of things, and also our fleet, our warehouses, and our IT group as well. And the plant group, which is Water and the wastewater plants, 23.7 million. The field group, which is our distribution of water lines and collections of our sewer lines, 28.9 million. Our compliance group that makes sure that we're in compliance with all EPA and NMED regulations, 5.9 million. Planning and engineering group is 5 million. The water resources group, 4.6 million. $21 million for power and chemicals. General government, this is the transfers to other governments, 5 million. And interfund transfer, which includes the transfer to CIP and to debt service of 114 million. Next slide. This is our finance plan. It shows the need of that 5% rate increase this year. No rate increase identified for next year. And again, this is just an estimate, so it's always subject to change as we create efficiencies and revenue streams may change. And again, there as we get into the rates a little bit, there's also start charging a little bit more to Intel. We take a look at their revenue stream. That may mitigate the need for additional increases in the future. But we did put one in for FY 2025 and another one in FY 2027. Our debt service begins to drop dramatically in FY 2027. Those monies, say from debt services, will start being funneled into the CIP programs, also into Water 2120 CIP projects to build up those balances. And again, not to have a need for rate increases. But again, this is just an estimate, a plan of where we look at for the next 10 years. Next slide. For our CIP budget, we're going to appropriate an additional 79.2 million. This includes about $12.5 million for sewer interceptors rehab and sewer line replacement. $9.2 million to continue to do work at the reclamation plant, Southside Water Reclamation Plant. Work on some smaller clarifiers to mitigate odor control. Work on the digesters and some security and landscaping. The facility is looking much nicer than it has in the past, and we want to continue to enhance the way it looks for the community there. And we continue to do lots of work on controlling odor control for the community there. $3 million for vehicle and heavy equipment replacement. $1 million to continue to change our meter system to AMI. We've had many conversations about that in the last few meetings. Our targets to add additional 30,000 meters to AMI. That will probably encompass about 65%, 70% of our total service area with AMI meters. At a minimum, $2 million for steel line replacements for leaky water lines. $350 million for renewable energy projects, and that's also due to a agreement with PNM, and $300,000 for the Water 2120 fund. And again, as I said before, and by FY 2027, that amount will increase dramatically. So we're on track with our decade plan spending. Next slide. So this is a real quick graphic of our CIP spending based on the decade plan. The little purple line is the amount of cash we transfer from the operating fund to pay for capital. As you can see, that continues to increase. It has continued to increase since 2014. At 2026 and 2027, you'll see a much larger increase, which we discussed with Water 2120. And then you see the need for borrowing money began to diminish as well. And as you can also see that the amount we spend for CIP every year has been increasing and will continue to increase. That large spike in 2030 is to begin to work on the the reuse plant on Montano to start treating and taking solids and moving solids to this reclamation plant and be able to treat water and use water on the west side of Albuquerque for reuse. So that's also a planned project that starts in 2030. Next slide. Also, we received funding from the county as part of their ARPA funding. We worked really nicely with us to allow us to have some money to do some projects with the funding. And what we're going to use the money for basically is $3.8 million for Carnuel sewage collection system, $4.2 million for the MDC water and sewer improvements, $4.9 million for Mesa del Sol non-potable reuse pumper, booster pump and reservoir. That's like a tongue twister, sorry. $8 million for the South Valley Drinking Water Project. So that's phases 8 and 9. We've pretty much completed phases 1 through 7. $15 million for Kirtland Air Force Base to Harris Interceptor rehab. $15 million for Volcano Cliffs and Corrales Trunk Reservoir and Transmission Line. And $2.9 million for the Bosque non-potable water reclamation plant and reuse system. And that was basically what I was talking about a little bit on the previous slide. Next slide, please. Rate ordinance highlights. We adjusted water and sewer rates by 5%, a 5% rate revenue adjustment. And we added a wholesale water rate for To'Hajiilee, chapter of the Navajo Nation based on cost of service. We also did that for Intel. We brought in our rate consultant, Stantec, Carol Molesky. You see her every 2 years. You'll see her at the end of this year when she completes another study of our cost of service on our rates. She came in and applied and created rates for To'Hajiilee and for Intel based on our cost of service model and determined the appropriate cost of charging both entities, what it cost them for us to provide them water. And then we updated all UECs by 5%. The rate adjustment impact for FY23, the rate adjustment applies across the board for all classes of customers. The impact for a typical residential bill will be $2.49. Will be $1.40 for water and $1.09 for sewer. We went into a lot of details about this too. We will continue the customer assistance programs we have in place. We will continue to provide the low-income credit that we provide. We will continue to fund and the Water Assistance Fund. I would say one thing about the Water Assistance Fund, I don't think we talked about before. There is funding that's been budgeted and approved by this board. Also, our employees, when they actually donate money to the United Way Fund, those monies also go to the Water Assistance Fund. So our employees through United Way help fund the Water Assistance Fund to help customers with their water bills. And then as you heard from our customer service manager, we still also providing the emergency rental assistance that's provided by the state of New Mexico.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner O'Malley.
Thank you. I just wanted to interrupt on the issue of the assistance programs, right, for folks who are having difficulty paying their utility bill. For the water, so you've got low income credit and the Water Assistance Fund. What are those two? Could you explain a little more about those two and how and who they help? I mean, in terms of, is it income based? What is it?
Madam Chairman and Commissioner O'Malley. So the Water Assistance Fund's a one-time assistance. If someone's in need and they can't pay their bill, maybe somebody in the family got sick or they lost a job or something, they can come to us and ask for assistance, a one-time shot to help them pay for the water bill for a month. And I'll get back. There's another caveat to that as well, but I'll talk about that after I talk about the low income credit. The low income credit is basically we pay for part of the water and sewer commodity rates. That is the Roadrunner Food Bank and there's another food bank service. I'm sorry, I can't think of it off the top of my head. They help us evaluate customers that can come in. They apply for aid. It's based on HUD guidelines as far as their income levels. The city of Albuquerque also helps us with that through their programs they offer. It's also offered through PNM. We work with PNM. So we do offer customer, and it lasts for a year. So if you qualify for that, we help you pay portions of your water and your sewer bill. You can only join that program if you're current on your bills. So what we have done is if we have customers that come to us and are not current on their bills, we do provide assistance through the Water Assistance Fund to get them current on their bills, and that would then allow them to apply for the low income credit to get the discount on their bills as well. So that I hope that answers your question, but that's kind of the difference between the two and how we use them.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation. I mean, it's not, I mean, we're raising the rates. You're saying it's typical of 249, but it's cumulative. So all the utilities are going up. And so that can add up. And for people who are struggling to make those payments, you know, it's hard, right? And so it's more than 249. It's the gas and the PN, you know, electric and everything going up. And so I just wanted to make sure that we had, you know, very well-funded programs in place to help people so that they don't default on their water bill.
And Commissioner Malley and Madam Chairman, I would also say is we do this in conjunction with PNM. And we do get assistance also from the city of Albuquerque, from family community services. They help us a lot with this too. So there is a lot of outreach with this. And we really do want to help those customers that really that have the need for assistance in paying their water and sewer bills.
All right, thank you, Stan.
Next slide. Just a quick, this is the last slide. This is the rate comparison. So the lowest rate is the one on the right-hand side, which is our water and sewer rates currently. With the increase, we move over 2 slots. So the city of El Paso becomes a little bit cheaper than us, but we're extremely much cheaper than the rest of communities in the southwest portion of the United States, and we're still well over half lower than our neighbor to the north of us of Rio Rancho, New Mexico. And that concludes my presentation. I stand for any questions, and I recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Alred. Are there any questions, Commissioner O'Malley?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I did want to go back to the debt service. And so a couple of things. I'm assuming that that's interest and principal payments towards debt service. And then what, so what is the interest payment per debt service for the year, just alone by itself?
Madam Chairman and
Okay.
Commissioner O'Malley, I would say of that amount, probably 75, probably 50-50, 50% principal, 50%. I don't know, it's different from every year. It's different with the way our debt schedules are structured. I would say that in the outer years, the ones the borrowings we just did, is that we've got so low interest rates. The The last borrowing we had about an interest rate of 1.2%. The one before that was just a little under 2%. Our credit is so popular. A lot of people order our credit when we sell our bonds. It drives interest rates down. We have a very good credit rating. Our paper is very popular with the community. So, you know, we were paying upwards to 5% when we borrowed the San Juan Chama debt. That debt also basically gets expired by 2026, 2027. But our newer debt, especially in the last two we did, the interest rate is just, it's minimal. I mean, basically we got free money theoretically from the market. So I would say in the outer years, you're probably talking 80%, 90% principal and a minimum amount of interest. So financially, people think of us very well, that we're doing very well with what we're doing and with our debt
Okay.
service.
I appreciate you explaining that, because sometimes there has been criticism about that particular thing, our debt service and the fact that we borrow. But as you said, you know, it's a very low rate, especially the new debt. Good to hear that that other debt's going to retire in a few years. That won't take very long. That's big. So I appreciate your explanation, Stan. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner O'Malley. Councillor Feeblecorn, followed by Mr. Rail.
Madam Chair, I didn't have my hand raised.
Okay. Mr. Rail.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to ask Mark just a quick question. Section 3 of R 2213 has a, I wanted to know what is the qualified project under the Section 3, just for my education, and it that relates to nonprofits, development projects. What are those about?
Madam Chair, Mr. Royale, historically, the board has set aside policy language for us to participate in affordable housing projects sponsored by the city or the county. So what we typically do is attach a second lien to affordable housing projects instead of charging the UECs for a project. This language would expand that to other projects sponsored by the city or the county for low-income residents. An example might be an employment and training program geared towards low-income individuals sponsored by the city or the county, or the city has recently discussed homeless encampments operated by nonprofits to the extent they needed water or sewer. The UEC could be attached separately and not assessed to the nonprofit developer or the city or the county, basically.
And Madam Chair and Mark, I think that's a great great idea, and I appreciate the ingenuity of that statement. It says that it's that you're authorized to do that. How do the local governments, or how does the city or the county present this to you? Is it by a resolution to the board, or just do I just call you and say, hey, I've got a project? I just want to know how the mechanics work, that's all.
Madam Chair, Mr. Ryle, historically, it's been done through the nonprofit developers that the city or the county engage in for a particular project. An example might be the Silver Project downtown recently. Instead of passing through the UEC, we attached a second lien, and as long as there's affordability, that UEC is not due. So that's an example, and certainly you can call and say, we have this project, can we use this mechanism? And if it met the criteria, of course we do it.
Okay, thanks, that's really helpful. I wasn't quite sure what the mechanism to get that done. I suspected I just had to call you, but thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Rael. Seeing no additional questions, I think what we will do is we will vote on these three, the ordinance first, the 022-1. I would move approval. Second by Commissioner O'Malley. Ms. Carrion, will you call the roll?
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Vice Chair O'Malley,
Yes.
Chair Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Quesada,
Aye.
Member Rael.
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Carrion. And as I mentioned earlier, we discussed all these three within that presentation. So we'll move on to B, which is R2213. I would move approval.
Second.
It's a motion and a second. Ms. Carrion, will you please call the roll?
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Vice Chair O'Malley,
Yes.
Chair Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Quesada,
Aye.
Member Rael.
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Thank you. And the final resolution related to the bills are R2214. I would move approval.
Second.
There's a motion and a second by Commissioner O'Malley. Ms. Carrion, will you call the roll?
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Jones, Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Vice Chair O'Malley,
Yes.
Chair Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Quesada,
Aye.
Member Rael.
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Carrion. Now we're on item D, R2215, authorizing the removal of certain uncollectible debt from the Albuquerque Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority accounts receivable records FY 2018 and prior. Mr. Stan Alred.
Madam Chairman, members of the board, this is our quarterly write-off. It's for $48,000.4 thousand. This debt's primarily wastewater only accounts. We have made an attempt to collect these over the last 4 years. They are all over 4 years in arrears, and we recommend writing these off, and I stand for any questions and recommend approval.
Madam Chair, I
Are
move
there any
approval.
questions? I think we have Councilor Feeblecorn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had a question on, are all of these accounts that have been disconnected?
Madam Chairman and Councilor Feeblecorn, not necessarily. A lot of these are wastewater only accounts. And you can't turn off wastewater to a house. You turn off the water. So there is no means to really attack a premise that's only has wastewater, because from EPA standards, we can't just shut off their wastewater. And a lot of these are vacated properties, like in the city, a business may vacate and nobody's in that business, or they're dilapidated homes. So these are homes that we haven't had the ability to shut off their water. Most customers, if you don't pay, we shut your water off, and we don't turn your water back on until you pay. And we also, so you have water attached and you were like in arrears for your wastewater bill, we could turn off the water. You have to see the Albuquerque and say, pay up, and we'll turn your water back on. But these are premises that nobody's there. they've been vacated, or they're sewer accounts that basically don't have water service and we have no means to collect from. Because I think the other thing, and we talked about this with our customer service manager, we are a premise-based utility. So we only build the premise. We don't build people. So whoever moves in and out of a house, they come and go, but we continue to build the premise. So we always attack the premise. And at some point in time where we can't get any money from the premise, we have to write it off. I mean, we generate probably in the summer of July, maybe $32 million in rate revenue. 48,000 is not a very big amount. We did at one point in time have to book somewhere's up to like a $1.3 million allowance for doubtful accounts for these kind of accounts. We're pretty much current now. We were allowed to take that off the books on our last audit. So we're pretty current. So these amounts that we bring every quarter are very, I mean, they sound large, but they're a very small amount comparatively that we spent a lot of time cleaning this up over the last 5 years or so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was unaware that we had a lot of residential customers that only were wastewater. And so my question was around, do we have a lot of folks in residential homes that have had their water disconnected that are living without water service? And it sounds like it's not necessarily that case. It's a different case for this. So thank you for the explanation, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Feeblecorn. Excellent question. Mr. Rea.
Stan or Mark, are any of these my relatives? Don't answer that.
I can't answer.
That's funny.
And Commissioner O'Malley, I seen that you were trying to say something. Did you have anything to add?
I did not. Thank you.
Okay. So with that, I would move approval of R2215. Is there a second?
Second.
There's 2 seconds. Ms. Carrion, would you please call the roll?
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Vice Chair O'Malley,
Yes.
Chair Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Quesada,
Aye.
Member Rael.
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Thank you, Ms. Carrion. So now we are on item R2216, authorizing the executive director to enter into a memorandum of agreement with the Nature Conservancy. Mr. Mark Kelly.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. My name is Mark Kelly. I am the Water Resources Manager. And tonight I'm going to talk about the Rio Grande Water Fund and our partnership with the Nature Conservancy and our ongoing partnership with the Nature Conservancy. So the Nature Conservancy is a nonprofit organization that manages the Rio Grande Water Fund, and the Water Authority is a member of the Rio Grande Water Fund. We have been since 2015, and we've been providing funding to the Rio Grande Water Fund since 2017. And the fund exists to help maintain healthy forests and watersheds. And these are really important to help provide a good supply of high quality water. And the Water Authority has been investing in our watershed through the Rio Grande Water Fund to help the watersheds in southern Colorado for our San Juan Chama water. The fund goals are to restore 600,000 acres of forest over 20 years. It exists to help do things like prevent wildfires and to protect our source water. As you can see from this slide, if the source water is not protected and wildfires do happen, we do get issues with lots of debris flow in the river, which we would not be able to use our San Juan Chama drinking water plant if that happened. This goes along with supporting the Rio Grande Water Fund is part of one of our policies from Water 2120 to work collaboratively and provide funding to protect and restore watersheds in the San Juan Chama area and the Rio Grande. The critical watersheds that we've focused our funding on so far have been our San Juan Chama watersheds in southern Colorado. These are diversions that we have up there on the Navajo, the Blanco, and the Little Navajo River. The Water Fund has analyzed these areas and taken into account areas that are going to have high fire hazards and flood hazards, and they focus their work and investment in places up there that have the greatest risk. And analysis has shown that the San Juan Chama watershed area is a very high priority, not just for the Water Authority, but for the entire state of New Mexico. This is an example of what type of forest treatments are done by the Rio Grande Water Fund up there. You can see in the top picture that big ponderosa pine tree, and also in the bottom picture where in the top the forest is overgrown. If a fire were to occur there, there would be devastating effects. And the Rio Grande Water Fund goes in and does thinning and mulching where they thin out the forest so that if a fire did occur, it wouldn't be as catastrophic to the watershed and also to the water quality coming out of that watershed. In the future, the Rio Grande Water Fund is looking to mitigate wildfire risk and build resilience. They are looking to continue the work that they've done on private lands, but also to expand onto providing mitigation on state or public lands. Previously, they've only been working on private land up there, but there is a lot of public land that they can that they're going to start being able to do treatments on. And they're also working on a lot on with us on doing some comprehensive fire planning. The resolution calls for us to continue our support of the Rio Grande Water Fund at the same levels that we are currently for another 10 years. With that, I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Are there any questions for Mr. Kelly? Seeing none, we'll move on, but just it's obviously this work is much needed and it's going to be needed way into the future. So with that, I'll make a motion for approval of R2216.
Second.
There's a second by Commissioner O'Malley, and I think it was Quesada. So Ms. Carrion, would you please call the roll?
Counselor Feeblecorn,
Yes.
Counselor Jones,
Yes.
Vice Chair O'Malley,
Yes.
Chair Pena,
Yes.
Commissioner Quesada,
Aye.
Member Rael.
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Thank you. So we are on other business, OB 229, the drought update, Mr. Bustos.
Are we good to go? Okay, cool. Thank you very much. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Carlos Bustos, and I'm going to be presenting a drought update. Next slide, please. So a classic La Nina continues to persist in our region. As you've seen in the news, much of the Southwest is experiencing extreme drought conditions. Some areas are being affected more than others, inclusive here in New Mexico. In Southern California, the Metropolitan Water District recently announced that 1/3 of its users are going to be going into 1 day per week watering restrictions. So not the entire metro area is being affected, even within a given district, if you will. In Colorado, the river basin and Lake Powell are at 24% capacity, and Lake Mead is at 31% capacity, according to the USBR, Bureau of Reclamation. In the Rio Grande Basin, the New Mexico Elephant Butte Reservoir is 13% full. Dry, windy weather with low humidity is affecting New Mexico as we continue to go through the drought conditions. And from just a month ago, you can see how the map, the drought polymers map, has intensified and showing some of our areas is already showing exceptional drought conditions as we experienced last year moving into the summer. There's dozens of wildfires across the Southwest. Our country's largest fire is currently happening and affecting many of the communities in northern New Mexico and the Pecos and Mora area. And, firefighters are currently battling the largest wildfire in history. These drought conditions are being felt in our forests and in many communities. And here in the county, we've reached 100% extreme conditions. We went from having a relatively cool spring season to what looks to be the start of another record-breaking summer in regards to temperature. We continue to be in drought watch in our service area, but customers are responding well. Water demand compared to last year at this same time is 320 million gallons less than what we were using last year at the same time. And our UPCD is 126. So that's really good because we started the year at 128. And that means customers are paying attention and responding to our drought measures. Our annual operational goals for groundwater, because we've been able to use surface water, are at 105% from our goals. So that's where we want to be in both GPCD and regards to our annual operational goals as we move into the summer season. Next slide. As we move into peak demand for June, July, and August, you can see that the outlook is still gloomy. It's looking like here in New Mexico and most of the region, we're still going to be faced by drought conditions. It's starting to improve, maybe some drought removal likely in some states that were experiencing drought conditions last year. So, as some areas continue to recover, some areas continue to get worse. We're hoping that we get a good monsoon season so we can hopefully get out of this drought that we're facing. Next slide. Because of the drought and because we're in the drought watch, we've instituted our measures and we're doing those measures that we continue from last year when this board approved drought watch. Our fees for waterways are double. We've also added 4 compliance staff. So that's given us the capacity to chase more waterways and follow up with complaints. Right now, we got over 80 cases that are open, and we are sending about 20 warning letters per day. So, already we're seeing the impact of having more people on the ground, chasing waterways and following up with those. We had our recently class on 3 steps to landscape success, which is our drought class for this current drought. We had so far almost 1,800 participants. The last class had 167 people, which was incredible. So people are still interested, and we're seeing savings from people that are participating. This year, we increased our public information, focusing on the Sarascape rebate increase, which went from $1 to $2 per square foot. And right now, we've converted to date this fiscal year almost 420,000 square feet. Our goal is to be converting 600,000 square feet per year. So we're pretty close to that goal. We think we may achieve it before the end of June and the start of the next fiscal year. Other programs that we launched and we're working on is the Low Income Conservation Support Program. We've done already 42 audits to low income customers, providing retrofits to help them conserve water, and also align them with some of the other programs that are available for low income folks. And we're also working with HOAs. We feel like HOAs are instrumentals in the future savings and present savings as well, and helping them develop long-term landscape plans so we can start moving away from a high water use turf and areas that are non-functional to low water use xeriscapes. Our goal is to work with 10 HOAs this year. We already got 5 lined up that we're working on. Next slide. And before I jump into the celebration of the tree bait, the other thing that we're doing is that we're reviewing our current drought plan so we can evaluate against the projections for supply and demand that we did when we evaluated and implemented Water 2120. We're currently reviewing and we'll be updating our plan and presenting an updated version to this board once we finalize that review process. That process is going to take at least six months so we can fully comprehend and see if we're following the best management practices when it comes to drought and managing drought here in our service area. No, the same slide, the one. Yep. This year we celebrate 10 years of our tree bait anniversary. So we're pretty excited to keep supporting tree baits and keep supporting the health of trees here in Albuquerque. The tree bait was launched in our latest drought in 2012. And the emphasis and the reason for launching that tree bait was to take care of our existing trees and tree canopy. A couple years after, we added that customers can plant low and medium use water trees. And now, because of that, we've incentivized almost $450,000 in the form of rebates to care for trees and to plant new trees. That's affected. We have about 5,000 customers that have participated in this program, and we're pretty excited to continue it. And next slide. And as part of that, we're part of the Alliance for Let's Plant Albuquerque, which seeks to plant 100,000 trees in the next 10 years. We're active participants of this alliance. You will see a campaign that's running for Let's Plant Albuquerque all around our city, where people are encouraged to take the pledge to plant new trees. This alliance includes the Nature Conservancy, the City of Albuquerque Parks and Recreation Department, the New Mexico State University, the New Mexico Forestry Division, Tree New Mexico, and the Dakota Tree Project. This map that you're seeing here was produced by the Nature Conservancy, and it looks at the existing tree canopy for Albuquerque as of 2020. Obviously, if you think about Albuquerque, many years ago, the diversity and types of trees that are found today in our urban area is a lot more diverse than what we would have found in the past. The bosque, of course, would have cottonwoods and ground covers and types of plants that would grow in the sort of like meadow areas. And then most of the foothills was mainly pinon and juniper and grass and shrub plants. So as our city has diversified over the years, our tree canopy has also diversified. It's important to recognize that many of these trees are getting old, and that's why we want to continue supporting the role of trees for our community via our tree rate. Next slide. And of course, for us, our goal continues to be the same as when the tree rate was launched, is to make sure that existing trees are well taken care of, that they're watered the right way, that they're watered efficiently, and that we can allow for that tree to grow to 5 years or 10 years, because that's when we really start seeing the benefits of many other trees that are being planted. So as we continue to be part of this alliance and continue to encourage new trees for our urban area, we want to make sure also that customers and people are taking care of existing trees, because every tree counts. The one in your yard, the one in medians, the one in parks, all the trees bring some form of benefit that can be localized in your own home. But when we think about a community, every tree counts, every tree benefits, and we want to make sure that folks are taking care of their trees. And with that, if you have questions.
Are there any questions? I don't see any hands raised, but Mr. Bustos, always great presentation, and I'm so glad that the Water Authority, has these additional programs out there to just, be good stewards of our city. So with that, we will move on to
Thank you, Madam
OB
Chair.
2210, which is the 2021 Consumer Confidence Report, and then it's Danielle Shurin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Danielle Shurin. I'm the Compliance Division Manager, and I'm presenting on the 2021 Consumer Confidence Report today. The Water Quality Program and the Compliance, this is fine. The Water Quality Program and the Compliance Division produces the Water Quality Report each year in response to all customer water quality concerns. The main goal of this report is to convey water quality information from the year in a way that everybody can understand. The report for this year is being mailed out this May, so they're starting to go out already. And just as an example of customer interaction, we received a call last week from a customer that read the report and lives near Kirtland Air Force Base, and understood that ethylene dibromide was an environmental concern near the base, and was wondering why that wasn't in our water quality report. So this report provides important information on what is detected and also what is not detected. So we explained to the customer that ethylene dibromide was not found in our water supply. We monitor regularly and routinely to make sure, but it's not in the water supply, and that's why it's not in the water quality report. So this is a really important report that we put out that creates engagement with our customers each year on water quality. And it's required. So why do we publish it? It's required by the Federal Safe Drinking Water Act. It's a public notice of what was detected during the year, and we're required to compare it to the water quality standards in the Act and make that clear and apparent to our customers. And then also educate and inform them about source water, any problems that are with our source water, and water quality topics that are coming up throughout the year. Next slide. A lot of this report is required information from the EPA. For example, water system information, we have to provide the ability for our customers to reach us for different issues and water quality concerns. Where does your water come from? Explaining that to our customers is important. So we do have in-depth infographic about where our water comes from, in groundwater and surface water. And then there's some standard definitions that EPA requires to make sure that everyone's understanding the technical information in the same way. Next slide. The detected contaminants from the year are in the report, and that's required in the main table. And that data is collected from our entry points, which are where new sources of water enter the distribution. So we have actually 27 entry points in 2021, and these samples are collected after water treatment, but before the first customer. So we understand exactly what quality of water our first customers are getting. We collect samples throughout distribution, and these can be collected anywhere throughout the service area, at homes, businesses, or hydrants. And also, there's specific requirements for the surface water plant. Monitoring is required more frequently at that treatment plant, and so that specifically is included as well in the main table. There's a table on other drinking water regulations, and I'll explain that a little bit more in detail, but an example is the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule, and we have another slide on that later. And then also educational information in terms of potential health impacts along with those definitions. EPA wants clear and consistent information on the health impacts nationwide. Next slide. All right, to give an example of definitions, I'm not going to go through them, but I just wanted to show, for example, in this parts per billion definition, we also add the standard definition and an example. So it's a little bit more of a relatable technical definition. So parts per billion, we put the example of 1 drop of water in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So it's to make some of this technical information more relatable for everybody. Next slide. All right, in the main table, you'll see everything that was detected in 2021, so for compliance requirements. So, and then also anything that wasn't collected in 2021, the most recent detection of it is the last 5 years. So you'll see some sample years in here are not 2021, and that's why, is because nothing from that analyte was collected in 2021, so that we show the most recent results. We also show, as I mentioned, the surface water treatment plant has its own column here because it has more stringent requirements. And then the standards that we're comparing it to is also listed, and verifying visually that everything in here meets requirements and is safe to drink for the EPA. The unregulated contaminants that are required, this is called the Unregulated Contaminant Monitoring Rule in the Safe Drinking Water Act. And this is not used for a compliance determination, but this data is used to determine what sort of contaminants will be regulated in the future. So it's a cycle of every 5 years. So we're still posting 2020 information because UCMR 5, the next round, starts in 2023. So once we have data from that 2023 collection, we'll update this table. But we're required to maintain the most recent collection in the report until that new data comes up. All right, this section is pretty standard language. This is some of the required health information. You know, some customers have different health conditions that make them more concerned about things like sodium or something that may impact their health. So it's specific information to certain health impacts that people may face. And I'll go into detail a little bit more on the lead on the next slide. Otherwise, this is standard information on impacts, with specific results from the year in the text that we've had. We have optional information in there. We like to brag about the most recent awards that we've gotten, explain in detail the surface water treatment process because it's complicated and technical, provide information on ways that people can get involved in their watershed and protecting the source water, and then some common concerns such as the voluntary lead testing, and we also have some links to more information on the CDC and COVID virus. And lastly, I just want to go through the voluntary lead sampling results. This year we had 22 samples from customers requested, and you can see here we had one result that was surprising this year. Our maximum is 20 parts per billion, and that's over our action level. So I just wanted to go through and explain what happens when we do get a high result here. So this was a customer, and as soon as we get the results, we call them and explain in detail what happened. This particular sample, the sampling supervisor was a little concerned with because before we turned it into the lab, it was discolored and a little bit brown. So they asked a lot of questions about how the sample was collected. And for lead, the sample is called a first draw sample. So the customer has to let the water sit in their pipes overnight and then collect the sample the first time the faucet is turned on in the morning. So that requires the customer to collect the sample in most cases, and us to provide education and assistance on how to do that. So in going through that with this customer, they thought maybe there was an issue with the sample collection. We collected multiple times throughout the house, the same faucet, other faucets. We collected from the casita in the back, and we could not get another detection for lead. So after weeks of working with this customer just to verify that we could not have a repeated high lead result, we confirmed that there was a problem with that one maximum sample with a 20 parts per billion. We do still report it because it was a real sample and it was a valid result, but the sample collection had a little bit of trouble. So with this customer, we could not verify any actual problem with their house or plumbing, so it turned out to be okay. And we're just increasing our education on sample collection and how to do that properly. And that's all I have on the summary of the water quality report. I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll move to the final item this evening, which is COB 2211, 2022 Annual Operating Plan. Ms. Diane Agnew.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I appreciate you hanging on towards the end. I will be presenting tonight our 2022 Annual Operating Plan. Every year, the Water Authority develops a operation plan for groundwater and surface water diversions. And this is actually the effort of that comes out of collaboration with our regional partners. So before we developed this plan, we're attending monthly, if not bi-monthly meetings with Reclamation, the Army Corps of Engineers, MRGCD, and other water users in the Middle Rio Grande to look at what we think is going to happen in the year as far as spring runoff, timing of that runoff, and then the resulting flows in the river, so that we can anticipate what we need to do on our side and make and then coordinate internally with groundwater operations and the treatment plant, surface water treatment plant, to make sure that we are all working together. Next slide. This is a map that you've seen many times, including a version tonight, but it puts the context for our annual operating plan this year. And you can see, I know you all have heard it many times, so I won't belabor the point, but the lower precipitation and the higher temperature does have an effect on our watershed. This year, while our snowpack was actually right around 90 to 100% of the median, that what was important was the timing of that runoff, and then also how much of that melt made it into runoff. So how much of that actually ended up into the rivers. So the precipitation and temperature outlook are really important. And so this is looking at May to July, and you can see we have lower precipitation. And if you go to the next slide, please, you can see that that's reflected in our flows here. These two charts are from a model that is developed by the Army Corps of Engineers and the Bureau of Reclamation. We participate in the meetings that really define what inputs are put into these models and the outcome of the model. They incorporate the projected spring runoff that we get from the National Data Center. And then what the model does is it allows you to adjust when you think the peak flow is going to happen. So you can see in these charts that the peak was around end of April, beginning of May. That was actually, we shifted it 2 weeks sooner in the year based on what we saw in 2020 and 2021. And then actually, we almost got this exactly right. This was showing peak flow around April 29th, April 30th. And that is about when we saw peak flows come through the Rio Chama and Central Gauge. The other thing it looks at is it's looking at outflow of Abiquiu. And this is important for the Water Authority because that's where we store our San Juan Chama water. And if the flows coming into Abiquiu are high, that means that the flows out of Abiquiu have to be high in order to keep the reservoir in balance and to keep native water moving down to Elephant Butte. And if the flows out of Abiquiu start to get too high, it goes into what's called flood operations. And that's what this is highlighting in the top left. When there's flood operations, the Army Corps can only release native water. It cannot release San Juan Chama water. And so we did some extra coordination with the Army Corps, the state engineer, and the ISC to move water preemptively to Elephant Butte so that we can maintain diversions that are surface water diversions. So that worked out really well this year. It was a really smooth coordination effort, and we were able to continue to divert surface water and deliver that to our customers, even while Abiquiu was in flood operations for about a week. But you can see in the bottom chart, flow forecast at Central, we are going to be below average again. This year looks very similar to the 2021 most likely scenario, though flows are slightly higher. You can see that beginning in July, they start to hover now down 0. They don't quite get to 0, but they do get low. And the reason why we are interested in this area is that the Water Authority has permit conditions with the State Engineer's Office that are, and also with the Fish and Wildlife Service, to maintain a minimum flow at the central gauge. So we are not allowed to, by our permit, continue to divert surface water if flows at Central are going to go below 122 CFS. So if we go to the next slide, we're going to zoom in a little bit further on Central gauge. And this red line is our threshold. We've actually taken a couple conservative steps here. So the red line is defined as 130 CFS. We did that because that's the requirement at the Alameda gauge. If we meet that flow at Central, we'll both meet the requirement we have for Central, and we know we'll meet the requirement at Alameda. So that's one reason we did this, and it builds some conservative approach into our operations plan. And then this curve that we've selected is actually what's called the 70% exceedance scenario. We've decided to use the curve from the model where we have a 70% chance that the flows will be better than that. So not quite doomsday worst case scenario, but a little bit improved from there. And again, another reason why we do that is because we don't want to come anywhere close to violating those permit conditions. So when we use that 70% scenario, we use this 130 CFS threshold, you can see here that we do get flows below that threshold. And we are looking at shutting down the surface water treatment plant in mid-June. The exact date of that shutdown will be based on the actual flows in the river and through tight coordination with water resources, groundwater operations, and surface water plant. The river so far has been tracking within 100 CFS of this curve, so it's a pretty good tool, but we'll just be watching the actual flows like a hawk. And then you can see the flows show that they rebound above that threshold in mid-September, so we anticipate being able to resume surface water plant in mid-September. And then there are these peaks that are in between those two arrows where the flows go above the red bar, and those are going to be monsoon. So if we get monsoon season, there's actually an opportunity to turn the plant on and operate in the interim. So again, this is just going to have to be real-time decision-making and tight coordination between the operations group and water resources, something that we've been doing for months now and will continue to do. Next slide. So this is a hopefully pretty bar chart to help break it down and what this actually looks like for our meeting demand. So you'll see that in April and May, we're showing that will be predominantly surface water. We're there. We are diverting as much surface water as our plant can at the moment. And then in July and August, we will be exclusively on groundwater. This is a reduced time period than we were predicting in 2021. And hopefully we can make that a shorter time period. And then starting in September and moving through the end of the water year, we'll be using surface water to meet the most of the demand. Also in here, you'll see that we will continue to have ASR, Aquifer Storage and Recovery. That's a really important part of our water management strategy. It works functionally like a customer. So it's not any extra work for us to send some of the water that we divert and treat at the surface water plant and put it into the ground. So that's what you're seeing in these bars. And then you'll also see that the dark blue bars get a little bit thicker in the December through March timeframe. And that's because this year we'll actually be able to operate Bear Canyon. So we'll have both projects operating. And then we'll continue to use reuse water and the non-potable system to meet irrigation demand. And you'll see those colors in here as well. And next slide. And all of this really depends on regional collaboration. And I think that's something to really highlight that the Water Authority does well. We are meeting many times a week with our partners to talk about flow conditions, to understand what others are going to do with their operations, to figure out solutions for native water. The board, you all approved the ability for us to set an agreement with the Reclamation to store P&P prior and paramount water in Abiquiu while El Vado is under construction. That's a really critical step that helps our regional partners and also benefits the Water Authority in the long term. We have agreed to continue supporting Rio Chama recreational rafting flows. The forests were closed down, so that's going to not happen now, but we'll stay in touch. We know that if we get monsoons, it's expected that rafting can resume, so we will continue to support that part of the recreational industry up in the Chama. And we have in the past coordinated a spring pulse release for the Rio Grande silvery minnow. The flows are too low this year, so they don't anticipate needing to do that. But again, we coordinate with our partners to make sure that we can support this effort if it's determined that it's needed. And with that, we'll go to the last slide and I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Are there any questions? No. Well, all these, Councilor Peoplecorn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just had a quick question on the silvery minnow release. I didn't quite understand what we're doing on that topic. If you could just restate it for somebody who's not as educated on this as I should be.
No, absolutely. And actually, I don't think we've presented it before. So it is an opportunity for me to use my favorite technical term is a jiggle. What they do is in higher flows is that they will send a spring pulse release of water into the river that increases flow to help inundate floodplain habitat where we know the silvery minnow likes to spawn. And so it's a way for us to promote Rio Grande silvery minnow propagation and create better spawning conditions. But for that to happen, we just have to have the flows significantly higher. And we're just not there this year.
So there will be a year of less than optimal silvery minnow release into the downstream area.
That's right. And it'll be back to back. So 2021 was a year where there was no spring pulse release, and 2022 will be that way as well. In addition to that spring pulse release, Water Authority and MRGCD and ISC and many others, actually, we do monitor the Rio Grande silvery minnow egg population this time of year. We've had our contractor out in the river since the 1st of May and monitoring to see how well the population is doing. So that's just like one part of a larger collaboration in the Middle Rio Grande.
Thank you, Ms. Agnew. Thank you, Madam Chair. Very sad to hear that we're not doing as much as we were before silvery minnow release. Thanks.
Let's all keep our fingers crossed for lots of rain for many reasons. So thank you all very much. I appreciate enjoying the evening with you, but enjoy the rest of your evening. This meeting's adjourned. Thank you.